And a very good evening to you. I am Lisa Lord, and my special guest is information technology expert and a principal consultant at Data Privacy and Management Advisory Services, Mr. Stephen Williams. Thank you so much for joining us on your program.
Thank you for having me, Lisa. Good evening, everyone.
You're most welcome. Now, your area of expertise is exceptionally broad, but this evening we want to focus in on some very key major areas when it comes to technology, starting with cyber security. Simply explain what it is.
It's basically for people who are watching, I guess, the steps and the technology you use, so processes and, the actual technical aspect of protecting computer systems. So whether it be, from a home person, installing antivirus and making sure that what you do online is secure, even from sending an email, make sure you know who you're sending to, who emails are coming from, to the corporation install complex analytical systems to determine what's coming in the network, right? And make sure you have skilled professionals, at least in the company or outsourced, that understand how security systems get breached and how systems get hacked.
So I know, for instance, and I'm guilty of it, let me put my hands in the air. Sometimes you get the update to update your antivirus software, and we never do it. So let's look at antivirus software very briefly.
Okay. Yes, the idea to update antivirus software is critical. It's part of a good, a cybersecurity profile. And we tend to not bother with it from time to time. But if you think about it, systems from the point of view of protection is like, good example is like having a security guard at your door, and you'd never kind of think about if they update the skills to know how threats evolve. So you have to keep training them. So updating antivirus is like training your security guard at your door to know what the latest threats look like, to ensure that they can spot them when it happens. So it's very critical that you actually update your system with the latest, I guess, patch, right? And I said patch too because it's not just the antivirus, but updating your system itself. So sometimes your Windows system need an update, and we kind of go, let's leave it for later.
Yeah, we ignore it.
Right? Mm-hmm. But I like to tell people this way in terms of cybersecurity is like having a home, right? And there's a vulnerability, such as a big hole in the wall, right? So you have a nice big roof, you have bars on the windows, right? But there's a little hole in the house that somebody can actually crawl through, or bore. We consider they go make it even larger and crawl through. So as much as you have the doors locked, right? Bars in the window, a vulnerability is like having all of those things in place, but then there's a big hole or there's a loose board that somebody can chip away and then get into your house. So the antivirus, yes, but making sure systems are up to date when Microsoft requests updating your systems.
No, I hear you with the antivirus software. Let's say I'm a novice. There are several versions of or several types of antivirus software. What do I use?
You're asking some good questions.
We're not also not doing ads. I'm just saying.
Well, and I'm going to go there and say that I would tell anyone, even Microsoft has built-in Defender, Windows Defender, and that has now become a serious contender, even if you don't have antivirus installed. All right, so as I said, we're not talking about ads here, but you can use what Microsoft has built in Windows Defender. You can actually use that. Most pages know Symantec Norton, right? So these leading ones offer half decent, protection, level of protection, but I will tell anybody these days is really your behavior. Going to certain sites that probably aren't too safe, right? Really testing your system, right? Or doing things online, not paying attention to actually, what comes into your system, like via email. So yes, so I would think that you can get a off-the-shelf solution. Most, I guess, computer outlets and stores in Barbados sell reputable and leading antivirus solutions. So anything from them, just pick one and go. And then I will tell any person that is dovetailed with your behavior online and make sure that you actually think before you click.
And we're still at the domestic level in terms of dealing with individuals. The average site now, you click on it, are you going to accept those cookies or not?
Well, the cookies themselves aren't dangerous. In terms of a hack, what makes a cookie dangerous is the fact that it then maybe track your browsing habits, right? And that can lead to you being profiled. So I guess, and the profile of yourself may lead to other issues. So if I'm going to try to hack you, because if you think about it, a lot of technology these days, from the antivirus to the other technologies that people use, really makes your system from a point of view of security fairly impenetrable. I say fairly. What people now begin to do is hack individuals. So in terms of the cookies, if I could find out where you go, what your tastes are, I can now say, hey, Lisa, I came across a nice restaurant site, blah, blah, blah. And this is a good recommendation because they like the same taste that we have. And it's like, who's this body? That know my taste. So the cookies tend to just leave a breadcrumb, and that develops a profile of you to actually be able to now begin to hack you. So if you can know your taste, where you go, what your interests are, it begins to build a profile of the individual, and that leads to, remember that little example of a little hole in the house that people can just keep boring? So the more information I get on you, the more easy you are to hack.
And that's why I asked about the cookies.
Yeah.
So that's at the individual level. Let's step it up now. Going to government.
That's
Government,
a big step.
a very big step. The government was forced to shut down its entire IT platform on March 10th, 2022. And this was after ransomware was found in some holes in the system. 9 months later, in December 2022, the island's lone public hospital, the QEH, suffered a massive cyber attack, and that created some panic. That also took a while to come back up.
Yeah.
Let's look at those two instances. What would have occurred there?
I kind of alluded to it just now when I said systems by themselves are becoming fairly impenetrable. When I say fairly, a system left by itself with requisite things like antivirus and other technologies, left on their own, will be fairly difficult to hack. What, I guess, threat actors, individuals who seek to get into networks realize, I can't really go through the front door, but I can piggyback on an individual that has access to the front door. So I'm not going to hack the system. I'm not going to try to get past the camera. I'm not going to try to get through the house, through the back door. I'm going to hack some person that has access. More often than not, what cybersecurity specialists the world over is seeing that it is the individuals that are the threat. If you don't train staff to identify what a potential threat looks like and to understand what to do if they've maybe compromised, for example, if I click on a picture from an email that I think is my bank or think is from government and I'm not trained to spot that it isn't, I may give my system permission to access that threat, and then it comes into the network. Because at the end of the day, right, what the systems rely on besides the technology to protect themselves is you, the human being, to ensure that I may know 95% of how to defend your system and defend us, right? I'm going to depend on that 5% being the human part. So, for example, email. Okay, email comes in, and goes out. Most systems can't determine if an email is a threat or not, because sometimes the email has a payload like a Word document or PDF or some type of technology like that. The system, from a security standpoint, has to let in those documents. We're expecting a Word document, expecting a PDF document to come in for business. And the system's going, you know what, I'm going to have to let this email in, all right? And I'm going to have to rely on the individual to be smart enough and to be trained enough to know that, yeah, this may say it's coming from a person that I know, but really and truly it is not, because it has these characteristics. And I think that's the problem. If you cast mind back to even a couple of days ago where the banks, a particular bank in Barbados is now being targeted for spam, right? And the payload says click here. So I saw it. That came to me too because I am a member of that specific bank. And the email looks legitimate, but on just a further glance, you can see that it's probably not, because it's asking you to do some things banks would never ask you to do in an email. But for the untrained eye, they may just go, oh, my bank is asking me to verify this transaction. Click on it, and then you start the process of probably being hacked.
And I'm going to come back to the bank specifically a little later, but it really is that easy to just target one person. Because I guess to the average person, when you hear about an entire network going down, you think that, okay, multiple systems were hacked, as opposed to starting with one and then the whole system collapses.
Yeah, I'd like to bring things back, especially for the layperson, to the example of a house. Because that's what it is. You have a house, depending on what you can afford, your house may have 2 rooms, right? Or it may have multiple rooms, right? So say 20 rooms. If any person is going to attack a home or a residence or a location, they're probably going to use one entry point. And then that one entry point, everyone is going to flood in, right? And then go to every room.
Right.
So I'm going to go into a home and use that entry point. I'm going to go to the bedroom, I'm going to go to the different dining room, go different areas. And I may exit through that same point as well and cover up my tracks. So yeah, so the best example of that is, yeah, you may think of a network that's large, but you've got in with one specific instance or attack vector. So I got in with this specific human. Classic example, if you're being watched, and being watched looks like, for example, LinkedIn, and realizing I want to target a specific business in Barbados that may be on the larger side. I'm going to sit and watch to see who is the new employee, right, of that institution. Because they maybe have not gotten trained yet on cybersecurity protocols of that particular institution. They may not be aware of all the players. If you think about it, you have a company, say, with 150 people. If you're there and you just post on your LinkedIn, new job at X, Y, or Z, right? And you're very excited to update your LinkedIn profile. You might not know the 150 people or the 149 people, plus you make 150 at the institution. And I would pretend to be one of those people that are seasoned, right, from another department, right, and start to have a conversation with you, right, and then gain your trust. And it may not even be to trick you into clicking on something, but I might want to know who the other key players in the organization are, who has the power. Like, I ask questions that may lead and be probing, and I'm just making you a friend. I don't even use you to target the organization. I'm just using you to gather information.
And we're giving them.
Yeah, because one thing about Barbadians is that we are a chatty lot, we are a trusting lot, right? And in so doing, we think that when we see these things like cybersecurity instances happen overseas, we think it doesn't apply here. So we kind of, give up the goose that lays the golden egg, and we don't even know what the goose looks like. That's the problem. We don't know what that one specific instance of information would lead towards the organization being compromised. Because, there's another example, to give examples for the public.
Yes.
All right? If I said to you, Lisa, here's a ticket, right? It's worth $10 million, but you can't cash it, you can't do anything with it, but you can only cash it or use it in a year, right? Would you try to cash it before?
Yeah, how my anxiety is set up.
You would try to cash it before, right?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so then you are not the type of hacker. A hacker will go, all right, so this is a $10 million lotto ticket, for example. It's going to
Guarantee. Bad example for me.
Right? Probably it's a bad example for you, right? But they will go, you know what, I would sit down and gather as much information, right? Take my time, and if it takes me 2 years, because in 2 years or 18 months, I'm going to have $10 million in my bank account. I'm going to gather information. I can take my time. I can study every employee. I can know what the weaknesses are. And when I find out one employee that is likely to be chatting and give up everything, I'm going to make them my best friend. I might realize that they're going on a business trip, and I might find myself there.
So hackers are very patient.
But if you think about it, the payday is great, though, isn't it? If some person says you can get $10 million, all you have to do is put in a little bit of it. What job is going to give you $1 million to $10 million if you play your cards right? The average person has to go to work. They spend expenses doing these different things, and they're getting a salary. But if I play my cards right, get to know Lisa. If Lisa has the in, maybe she is the assistant to the president, right? And I work Lisa, finesse Lisa a little bit, and she starts giving information about her supervisor or her boss. Might not even be interested in Lisa. I'm just using Lisa for information. So when something happens, it doesn't even look like it's Lisa.
Online sounds very scary all of a sudden.
Online, I will tell people, what makes it scary for Barbadians is that it goes against our culture and nature. Right? That's why it sounds scary. When you live in a large country, you then don't know who's out to get you.
Right.
When you're in a small country, everyone's your friend.
You're not as skeptical.
It's not skeptical. And that's why it's scary to Barbadians, and that's why we don't take it serious. Because the culture, right, is nothing that we are accustomed to, and therefore we are not necessarily positioned mentally and culturally for it.
Staying with government systems, in terms of, we have a lot of agencies and departments across government. Is it a case where every agency department perhaps is using a different type of cyber security?
I think most government departments have their own physical infrastructure, meaning that they have servers and they may have the individual firewall. But that is to aid in the centralization of things such as revenue collection and being able to actually track finances, especially things such as the government financial system, which is eluding me now, the government's procurement system, and government's revenue accounting system.
Yeah, Barbados Revenue Authority as well.
Correct, right? So therefore, the only way to make that work efficiently is to have a network, which means that if you have a network and it's open and trusted with other government departments, then it stands to reason if you can compromise one, you can possibly compromise all, right? And depending on how the network is constructed, that system inside that network as a trusted system means that it can talk to other machines, right? And then if you can trick one, maybe you have an entry point, maybe, depending on how it's structured. And I'm sure that since then, whatever loophole that might have been open for that to happen should have been closed. I'm thinking when you now have systems like that, it is a combination of process, right? Systems and people. So process meaning that when I turn on my computer, I have to log in, and I probably have to do some type of protocol. I read email, and I know if I read email, I do certain things. So I think it comes down to, for example, to the system. So therefore, what systems do I have in place to protect networks? I know the system that government uses is a very, very good system. All right, and we stay away from talking brands because it doesn't necessarily make a difference with the brand, but what the brand can do for government, and it's very good. So I would hammer home the point that it has been really the people, right, that have been compromising the systems, right? Even within the gambit of even the hack that we talk about in terms of government having to shut down. And it's not necessarily difficult, but I could appreciate the fact that when government systems were set up, just like Microsoft, when the internet first came out, Microsoft had no concept of the threat internet could bring. Right? When government systems came online, they probably had some concept of security, but if I have a bugbear with government is that there is no central cybersecurity focal point, because that individual would ensure, review cybersecurity across all the government. And I would always say this, you need a throat to choke, right? If you don't have a throat to choke, then the individual's not motivated. Because if, for example, you say that I'm in charge of procurement, but then you give me maintenance on the evening, right? And some other thing tack on to my role, right? But my main job that you pay me for is procurement,
Right.
right? And you make it a secondary function of my job. Then you can get a secondary priority. And if it's not primary, if it's not the focal point, the main priority, I don't care how much money we spend in good systems, I don't care how much we spend in the processes, you need a throat to choke to make sure that the standard that is set is being met. Because I can put in good systems, I can train the people, but if I don't do that audit, if I don't do that consistent, repetitive function to make sure that we are keeping up, the systems are, the threats associated with those systems are basically audited, right? To make sure that, yes, we said we're going to do this, we did it, all right? And going forward, we keep ensuring that they keep meeting the standard, they keep evolving to be better, they keep it up with the threats and the threat landscape. These things, if that's not done, if there's not a central person responsible for that, well, then you make it, or you give it to IT manager, who has to maintain the systems, who then have other reports, who have other things to do and make IT secondary, or IT security, cybersecurity secondary. You're going to have a secondary priority. Then it's not, a situation where you find yourself saying, shoot, I didn't think about that, because you weren't necessarily having to focus on it. And I'm not saying that every government department needs an individual in charge of cybersecurity. I'm saying that by having a focal point or even a focal team that is responsible, that can go across to all the government departments and ascertain what maturity level they're at. Because not every government department is at the same level.
Of course.
Right? And in so doing, and that comes down to, I guess, resources. Let's be practical. Government has 4 billion things to do with $2,000. All right? And government is going to have to get smart and efficient about what things they can do and what things they should do. My position on it is that at this point in time, I am eager to see a chief cybersecurity officer for government, even if it's one person, who has teeth, right, and not just a title, who can now go and audit and be responsible for not just the cybersecurity, but have the ability to enforce within government those practices and things that would protect government. Because you can give me a title, and then when all of a sudden I have to report to a PS who has other priorities, who cannot get it up to the chain of command to actually get things done. So that's the other problem or other thing with government, in my mind. Government structure is not suited for cybersecurity in 2024. The way government is structured, Prime Minister, Cabinet, senior government officials, PSs, and we drill down. It's military-like, right? Things flow up and take time. Things flow down and take time. Hackers don't care. Hackers really don't care. Hackers love that because when you have to now go to the Minister of Finance for money that has to be budgeted for, that has to be looked at, analyzed against other priorities, hackers don't care. Hackers really don't care. Hackers love that because when you're trying to strategize and prioritize, they're boring a hole into your network. They're spending time learning people, all right? I would say this. It's good that our leadership has now made Barbados a beacon of, I guess, of note. So Barbados is becoming more popular the world over. Our economy is growing, and we are now moving towards our development status. It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, more eyes are on us.
More eyes are on us, right? As our economy grows, it means that you're now going to be growing up in status in terms of economic development.
Of course.
That means that wealth is being created. If wealth is being created, it now means it's an opportunity to be actually taken, all right? So when you do these things, you have to, get up front but protect home base. So for me, right, what I see happening is that we are growing economically, we're growing, and there is growth, so that's good. But then what are we doing to ensure that we retain that growth? A part of that comes from the fact that all of our business is being done online now, right? For example, BRA, right? I have to interact with BRA. We all have a TAMIS number. We have all these things. It means you have systems that you're going to have to spend as much time protecting, right, as investing in the people themselves.
Given all you said, and we're hearing a lot, government touting this digital transformation, we're moving from paper records to digital records, for instance, over at the QEH. Are we ready for a digital transformation?
Ooh. I take a deep breath there because whether or not, the reality is here we are, okay? So we have begun the digital transformation process. One of the things that is left to be done on the table, not just for government, for business in general, for Barbados in general, is that we don't have something called data governance, right? Data governance is a critical thing if you can talk about data privacy, right? Digital transformation. Classic example of what that means. At a base level, we're talking about how is your data classified. For example, you mentioned hospital. Hospitals should have the highest level of data classification in terms of individual records. Part of the data, I can speak to data privacy, I know we can talk about that later.
Yes, we will.
Right? But if you think about healthcare records are very, very personal, intimate.
Extremely.
Right? And it may not be as intimate as a record coming out of the environmental impact assessment that, Environmental Division of Barbados may have. If you talk about my personal records, right, in government, we need to have that data governance structure that would allow for the individual within government to know where this record sits. Right now, everything in government is PS approval only. So to even get an email saying or a letter saying, can you do X, Y, Z, write the PS, write the PS, the PS, the PS. We have the PS thing, right? That's why it's like military, right? You want to get something done within the military, the commander, the general, right? You may have the president or the executive of the country, but it's the general, the general. The same thing in Barbados, we have the PS, the PS. A simple thing must go through the PS. But if you have the information classified, this is for minister and PSIs only. This is for senior staff, but it can be released if it meets a certain criteria, and this is for public consumption, right? If you don't have that, can we truly be ready? I'm not sure, because it means that we talk about digital transformation. The key thing about digital transformation is information and data. But if data is locked in this tight fist of must be PS approved, the PS has 4 billion things to do. Your request for information ain't that much of a priority, right? But if we have a data classification and governance structure in terms of who can change information, who can access information, how information is classified, right, and the roles associated with access to that information, then the digital transformation becomes a lot easier, right? And then protect it becomes easier as well, because we know that we're not going to spend $4 billion to protect a $2,000 investment, right? But if it's really, really serious, if it's really impactful, really important, right, then you can appropriate the priority and the resources to that information. But if everything is classified as top secret, if everything is classified, then protecting is difficult. For example, again, let's use examples, Lisa, right? The Prime Minister gets a bodyguard. But does it mean necessarily that everybody's life is not as important as the Prime Minister's? No, we just know at that level, because of who she is as an individual, must be protected against everyone else, right? That's the same with information. There's some information that is no less valuable, but we know that all information is not the same.
Right.
Unless we can start classifying information across government, this works for business too, because everything in business is like top secret. That's what is limiting the economic development in this country right now. But if you think about it, all right, I had a book flight for my daughter. I can go on BA, or I can go to cheapoair.com, all right? And you go on Cheapo Air, and you sometimes get better prices or the same price or whatever, but you don't have to go to BA because they share information with each other. That's the economic nugget that we keep forgetting for the economic development of this internet economy. If we don't share data, right, we're not going to get the benefits of digital transformation, because it then becomes no different than paper. The reason why paper is difficult to develop systems and the economy with is that paper takes long to germinate and to transfer. Data is instant. Mm-hmm. So therefore, if you don't have the ability to share data because you don't know how valuable it is or how it should be classified or should it be shared at all, we're going to miss the boat on digital transformation.
Well, we have a lot more information to share with the public, but we do have to take a short break. Stay with us. You're watching One on One.
Keep it clean, keep it green.
Barbadians, we invite you to get involved and play your part as we clean and green Barbados. Come into your community with media launches, bulk waste collection exercises, community engagement sessions, and giveaways. Get on board. Let's keep Barbados clean and green.
Beautiful, beautiful Barbados.
Welcome back as we continue our discussion with information technology expert Mr. Stephen Williams. Mr. Williams, in the first half, we looked at cyber attacks and we concentrated heavily on what happens in government systems. Let's shift now to the private sector. Most notably, several major banks and credit unions were left exposed within the last 2 years in particular after suffering cyber attacks. So, you know, anything surrounding people and their money, they're very invested in. So, according to a study conducted by accounting firm Deloitte, the first wave of ransomware attacks in the Caribbean started around 2013, and since then they have not stopped. So let's look at the private sector, specifically the financial institutions and the cyber attacks.
Okay, let's deal with something first that I must get out of the way. The majority of, I call it inconvenience. The majority of inconvenience has come with the credit cards being compromised, not your bank account, okay? There's enough processes in place that your bank account specifically will not necessarily be directly targeted, meaning that I've gone through the front door as robbing a bank. I go through the front door with a shotgun and I'm telling you, hold the bank and I want your money out, you want the money out the bank. That's not what has been occurring, right? What has been occurring is the fact that we have now become a global nation, part of the global internet community, and we can shop anywhere. We can do basically those things that the global community can do in terms of shopping online. Not every site that we go to has the same level of cybersecurity, I guess, processes and protocols in place. And for example, some even like Uber, right? Wherever people travel, see, they take Uber. And even those large companies have been hacked. So when those large companies get hacked, they may store your credit card on file, if it's popular enough, like a Uber or one of the top guys, then you can have a set of Barbadian credit card, credit card data, and then the banks sometimes don't know if where the compromise stopped. So they're not going to know that it was Uber that got hit, right? And then only these 20 cards here. The safe thing to do is to recall all the cards, or a group of cards if it has a specific batch number or batch lot, and say, you know what, we can change your card out, right? Because they don't know where the hack or where the compromise starts.
Right.
No, what has been happening, what has stepped up, is that we now have gone into a realm where certain banks have become more popular, all right? And as we get out into the world, more of us are known. And, our online experience becomes more nuanced. You're buying stuff and you're getting known. The thinking is that Barbados has some less than sophisticated people. So it's easy to trick a Barbadian because we're not paying attention as much. So therefore, we're going to send an email pretending to be a bank, a local bank. And then when you click on it, it goes to a good site that looks like the bank. So you look at it, it's similar. So it looks same logo, same position, same font, same everything. And the average person cannot tell, that this site is not the bank that you belong to, right? And if they happen to get it right, where it looks like the bank, and you click and you enter your password there, the guys at the back are still using password being entered, and then as soon as you think you're going to log in, give you some error, and you say, what? But those guys are fast. And the minute that error is triggered, they're now logging in with your account to your bank and then transferring the money, right, that quickly. It might not even use the transfer. It might just be harvesting that data, right, credit card information, whatever information they can glean from you to pass it on. Because we don't realize it's like drug mules, right? These guys at this rung might only be in charge of harvesting access credentials. Because you may not even be aware as error is like, oh shoot, let me go to the site and put this information again. And you log in, it's no problem. But then, you do that to like 2,000 people, they have 2,000 access credentials, right? And then they pass on up the chain, who may now have information about you, your banking history, and now they have the passwords for it. Because where the problem starts, remember that profile that we talked about earlier, right? If I don't know your taste, because one of the questions would be, if I call in, right, to get your account changed or to change some of your account, they're gonna go, okay, name me, what's the name of your pet? But you always go in on these sites and then you always put in your pet name, or you're always on the forum talking and you give up personal information. So then these are data harvesters. So these guys harvest the first rung. Another hacker may harvest the personal profile of you, and then now they have a whole dossier on you, all right? And then even if you go and change your username and password, I may call into the bank and go, hey, I'm Lisa Lord, right? I want to change my password, I can't get in. Okay, so what's the name of your pet, right? Or since what, can you put in your last password that you knew, right, or no? And these guys now have enough information to actually trick the human on the other end to don't compromise your system. So that's why we have now reached the level where Barbados is becoming well known, our banking system is becoming better. But for example, if I'm going to hack Barbados, you know what I'll do? I'll jump on a plane from another country, right, and just look around and observe that. Tip, for example, and I'm seeing this where a card you can tap, right? This happened to me today, right? Where I took up my card, rested down there, right on the table. My card was in my eyesight, but the teller took up my card and just tapped for the money, right? She said, instead of telling me, should I tap here? She took up the card and just tapped. Now, if you think about it, if a potential hacker was watching, they'll realize, wait, you just got to tap the card. You don't have to put in a password, right? The individual just took up the person's card, right? Now, what does that mean to some person, right? The banks will tell you, if that tap to pay, you must present an ID. You must present an ID. Because suppose that was someone else's card.
But I know some places have instituted a policy where if it is more than $100, you can't tap. You have to swipe and put in your PIN.
One thing, what we don't understand, that hackers don't want 100 plus more. If you think about it, right? I can go tap here for 80, tap here for 60, tap, 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 right? Buying stuff to the card says, no more. Toss that card, now I have stuff that no value that, maybe $1,000 sell it, and all they did was steal some person's card because they didn't have to present an ID to the person at the counter, right? So therefore, they can just go on tap and say, "Oh, we're tap to pay." You feel that the person look and see that it says Susan Boyce on the card, right? But this is me as a man, X, Y, Z. You know, think about it.
Things are moving fast.
Right?
They're not paying attention.
At least they're paying attention. Are they trained? I said the problem with Barbados is that we're not training our people. The banks have said, that's what I said, I know, Lisa, you're sometimes, look at the banks. The banks are the problem. The banks have said there is a requirement to present your ID prior to tapping. And the reason for that is to ensure that the card you're using, right, is an authorized purchase, because the person that is giving you that card is the individual for that. Because the authorization over 100 or over 200 or whatever the figure is I must know code, something that I know that's intimate to me.
But my husband gave me his card and I'm not on his account.
Well,
How does that work? You understand what I'm saying?
yes, the difference is that she asked you for ID. Still. So the fact that he did that is that he know that people lapse in Barbados. You see that, and that will become a cultural norm. Yes, he could do that. He's your husband. Good for him. But what should really happen is, upon the fact that if you spend over $200, it asks you to put in a code. So therefore, sure, there's something that you know that authorizes you to make such a transaction. But if it's under $100 now, it should be that ID card. I agree, tap to purchase or tap to pay is wonderful.
It is.
Right? I love it, right? But the step should be that you present an ID, you look at the name on the card, look at the ID and go, tap now, please.
Mr. Williams, I want to go back to something you said. You spoke earlier about the banks being hacked and it usually being related to the credit cards. However, in the recent hacks that we would have had, in some cases, there were a few where people went into their accounts and funds were missing.
Okay, so first of all, not all is a hack. Give an example of me. One day, right, I went into my bank account, and this is a true story, so Lisa, we having one-on-one on this conversation.
I hope so.
I found $29,000 in my account, right? And I was like, wow, I had a good week. However, no, right? So I didn't go withdraw the money. I went to teller and said,
You couldn't in any case.
right? But no, not $28,000.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But I went to teller and said, put it back. I tell him, whoever it is, take it off. Ain't mine. What do you mean, Mr. What is your bank account? I said, listen, y'all try to set me up, right? And when she went to check, whatever she did, she go, oh, 1 second, please. And my account went back to the normal amount that's supposed to be there. That's not a hack. That was a banking error. So sometimes the average citizen don't know the difference between a banking error, right, and an actual hack. Now, an actual hack would be some person getting to your account and moving it somewhere else. Okay? It's very from where we sit, right, as banking customers, it can be difficult to tell. Okay? Now, and this is a true story, I think, in an African nation, right? I don't know if it's Bahrain or someplace, no, I don't think it's Bahrain, but that's not guaranteed actually in the name of the country, right? A banking error or the government's financial system, right, basically caused every civil servant to get $200 less. That was a financial system's error, right? One could say the government got hacked, maybe, but we don't know for sure until the audit is done. So, to answer your question, unfortunately, I can't tell you.
Right.
Right? That's where investigations are done. So, there may be situations where the banking system, right, for whatever reason, triggered the error because of something that has not been properly calculated or properly designed for, right? And it's possible, right? Or it could be a situation where your specific account was hacked because maybe you clicked on the wrong email, and by extension, money was then moved out of your account, right? Or has led to your account being compromised.
Again, you spoke about credit cards, but now we've moved into an era where we can use our debit cards online. And there is a big difference between using a credit card versus a debit card online in terms of the systems that are in place to protect your funds.
Yeah. So, I just want to educate the audience a little bit.
Sure.
All right. There are certain things your credit card, all right, let's look at your credit card as having an international passport, all right, and your Visa card as having a passport with less validity. You can go less. For example, you possibly cannot rent a car with a Visa debit, all right? And there's certain, you can't hold on to a hotel actually with a Visa debit, right? With a credit card, you can. The reason for that is, the assumption is with a credit card, you have funds there, right? With a Visa debit, you have more access to move the funds. You can't move the funds around with a credit card. So say, for example, I can go online, hold the hotel, right? And then move funds off. And when they go to try to get that money later, it's gone.
Right.
So these people tend not to like using a Visa debit. So internationally, it has less weight, especially in the States. For example, renting a car. You may rent a car for, say, $100 a day, but then you incur other charges. And you go, you know what? I'm moving the funds off. So whatever other charges I rack up, I can't get access to. Not so easy with a credit card. In terms of the credit card, it's the bank's money. So the bank is saying, you know, we're going to trust you with $5,000 or $10,000, whichever you can qualify for in terms of your credit, all right? But with a Visa debit, it is whatever money you have on your account. I tell people, be careful, all right? Because if you tie that to your salary, all right, that's where your money is debited to, and it basically is compromised, then, well, then you have to probably get your salary. And banks, if it's your money, as opposed to the bank's money,
The risk is at you.
the risk is at you. They have to put it back. If it's fraudulent, they're going to probably try to put it back. But the investigation is triggered less. They're less enthusiastic about it. That's why I tell people, I still, in certain circumstances, prefer the Visa debit. All right, I can tell you why. There's nothing against the law saying I can have a second account. So this one account that has my bank account in terms of salary on it, I don't want a Visa on it, for example. This account, with Visa debit, I'm going to put maybe $500 on it. I know it got on my Netflix, it may got on certain things, one-off payments like Amazon, you know, so I'm going to put the money there that I need. So if some person gets $20 off of me, good luck to them. But not getting $20 off me every month, right? Because when you have a credit card now, and I keep paying it back, they can keep hitting every month and I can go and complain to the bank. You realize now that you put $500 there and you're only going to use one-off payments, they keep hitting it, nothing's going to happen.
Right.
The bank will be saying, Steve, what is this payment about? Because there's no money here. The bank can't move money off of one account they haven't put it there to deal with that payment. It's just not going to go through. So there is a way to use the Visa debit, right, to be more efficient in terms of certain things like that. And I know it dirty. Meaning that I have a credit card for probably going to courts, right, and making a payment like for furniture or going to certain places, not online. So physical places where you might want to use a credit card for local purchases. Well, when I'm online and I go in on sites that I would love to think I can trust, but I can't, right? That Visa debit on a special account is still the safest thing in that regard, to me. And that's how I do it. Because where the bank says their money use a credit card, I still got a pimping behind the fact that this is still on my account and the bank may do it and get around to it. But I'd rather use a Visa debit on an account that I have no money
Limited
on
funds, yeah.
until I decide to put funds there. I'm not dumping my salary, my business there. No, I'm dumping only the money that I need. So if I know, like for example, all banks now have become, like, thank God, responsive enough that I can have two bank accounts. I go on my app, right, and I can see the primary, which is my salary, right, and the secondary, which is the Visa debit. I have a Visa debit card for that account. I realize I go in and pay Amazon $100, right? I transfer the 110 Barbados dollars there. Amazon get their money, right? And I make my account base it down to zero, right? I keep doing that because, first of all, there's no charges really associated with it except the 2%. So I put, you know, enough for the 2% or whatever. And it's basically no money there. So whoever's trying to get at my money ain't getting at nothing because it's on another account that's not tied to that card.
You would have touched on it briefly before. Let's delve right into data privacy.
Okay, data privacy is the practice, and actually it's just not just a practice, but it's the law that governs how organizations should treat to personally identifiable information. So health record, financial information that's tied specific to individual. So take for example, corporate finances, data privacy doesn't deal with that, or data privacy law doesn't deal with corporate finance, like how much money your business make and that sort of stuff. It deals with if you have, take for example, a bank account, right? And being able to access that. Lisa Lord has this much money on the account. Or Lisa Lord's personal health records look like this, right? So it's the practice that should go into protecting personal identifiable information.
Do we have enough systems in place across both the private and public sectors to ensure that person's data is protected?
Well, that's a cybersecurity question. And I would say we have elements, and the government has 3 years ago taken the step to have data privacy law. In that data privacy law, a lot of people don't realize Section 67.1 speaks to those cybersecurity practices that must be done. Unfortunately, as some person told me in the business community, Steve, until somebody get fined or locked up, business community don't care. So, that said, right, do we have enough stuff in place? We have elements. It's fragmented. It needs to come together from both government and the private sector into a cohesive strategy. What does that strategy look like? It's going to evolve, right? We didn't have AI back in when the law was written, right? So it must evolve, right? But do we have the structures in place? Yes. So we have things like, encryption technology that certain people use. We have, we get audit from different companies, so auditing is part of it. Resilient systems, most people back up their data. Right? These are elements that speak to our law called the Barbados Data Privacy Act 2019. Right? And there are elements in place. But if you go into an organization and ask them, could you give me the policy for your data subjects in terms of their rights? Right? No. They would ask you, excuse me. Right? Last Christmas, I see people having competitions where they ask you to write at the back of their receipt, your name, address, telephone number. And I said to myself, madness, because that's actually against the law. Right? It's against the law. You can no longer ask individuals for the name, address, telephone number, their personal identifiable data without first telling them what their rights are as a data subject. It's against the law. But I see that every day and I smile to myself and say, you know what? Until the legal infrastructure penalize, I said legal because it's not only government, the law has to be willing, the legal frameworks must be willing to execute that. So until that happens, we may have elements, but it's not going to be a cohesive approach, which is, yes, we may have the technology, but we don't have the policies behind it, and staff are hardly trained. And on top of that, the executive of staff don't know the difference between training staff on cybersecurity and training staff on data privacy. Classic example of that. What does that look like? Right? I use examples of me.
Sure.
Right? During COVID, beautiful example of that. Right? Remember the Blue Book? Remember when you go into
Oh yes.
right,
You had
going
to
to
write
your name in Blue Book.
Yeah.
Right?
Get your temperature taken and the temperature.
Yes. So, I had people call me saying, Stephen, you could believe lovely lady went into a gas station, right? And
I know where you're going with
right?
this.
And the security guard, she looked good,
Yeah, took her number.
right? And called,
I've heard about
clearly,
instances.
no training,
Yeah.
no accountability. That's a breach of data privacy. Because she had to get into the gas station, she had to give her personal identifiable information. Yeah. But if accountability was there, he would have been trained to say, this information is only for the purposes of X. And on top of that, right,
Contact tracing.
accountability would have said, this Blue Book must be handed over and destroyed at the end of this period. So companies don't know, staff isn't trained, right, and the legal structure isn't willing to execute on the law that is in place.
I wasn't expecting that example. And like I said, I've heard of instances like that happening, but again, that's the information you want from me, and I want to get into your establishment. I mean, that period has passed, but the point is that you have my information.
But you see, for example, and that period has passed, but the thinking has continued, right? Last Christmas, right, many businesses had Christmas competitions where you wrote,
as you said before,
right, and then you do not know what they're going to do with the data after. What was the purpose of collecting the information? Yes, I can possibly win a Christmas, a next ham, or $500. But what are you doing with that information? If I don't want you to keep it past the price point, the competition period, what recourse do I have? Unless you're prepared to give that up to the person entering it, and that should mean that if it's a competition form, at the back of that form should be all of my rights as data subject. Right? That's not done. That's never done. I'm not going to call names, but even some of the large institutions don't have a data subjects right section on a form. They want to know where you live, who your family is, all yeah. And what I also noticed too is that when it comes to getting information from you, it's always in big, bold neon lights. And when it's about your rights, you got to squint and try to find the little fine point to read. No, that also too is against the law. Because if you have something that you deem as a corporation that is valuable for you, you must be able to see the information. I must also be able to see my rights in equal footing as you, the corporation, as getting the information.
So Stephen Williams, just a lighthearted moment, would never enter a competition?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't have, what's call them, think cards. I don't have these little tap cards, everything. No, I have one, but for the most part, me and them gonna talk soon because, you know, I can start asking some questions like, you know, I want the information you have, I want to see.
But well, let me ask you this question. Moving on to the big dog in technological circles, artificial intelligence, AI.
Yes. You come to my favorite part.
Is it?
Right. So where does that fit in with cybersecurity and data privacy? First of all, on the cybersecurity front, right? If you think that we've seen attacks, no, right? Wait till they become automated by artificial intelligence. Because a lot of people still believe where we are with artificial intelligence that it's run, right, by the leaders. So take, for example, I like to give examples so people understand. Microsoft Word is controlled by Microsoft. But they're open source word processing tools that people, not everyday people, but programmers create, right? So therefore, I can have an AI tool that looks very much like the top tier ones that Microsoft would put out, right? That can now start to automate cyber attacks, right? There's technology where now, for example, I can have a recording of you, Lisa, right? Take 2 minutes recording, and then I can put it in through an AI synthesizer and just type out a sentence, and it sounds exactly like Lisa.
Yeah.
It would trick anybody. Lisa calling me right now. Oh gosh, Lisa calling me, and this is the question she asked. And I gave it so much information. So what does that mean?
We'll be better at scamming?
Oh yes, we will be, right? And why is that scary? Because we have not even done the basics. You see, America and the world has gone advanced, and we have not even got off to the basics, right? And if you're not done the basics, the basic foundation for protection, no, the world has gone advanced. We in a whole world of hurt, right? On the data privacy side, if you do not have, remember we talked about data governance earlier in this conversation? If you don't start protecting the data and having a level of respect for data in terms of what really should be protected with what level systems and protocols, it means now that if you start using AI within a company, classic example, right? If you don't have an AI policy for your company, it means that some person can take data from the company, use a popular platform like ChatGPT, right? And dump a whole bunch of data there, right? Their work productivity increases, great. But now your personal data, now often somebody clogged their server, right? And if you don't have AI policies for your organization, like I'm doing one for a company now, right? The basic premise is, first of all, does staff even know what AI is, right? Because it was always ChatGPT. But you may have an iPhone or Android, Siri, and here Google, that's AI. So people go, oh, AI is a new thing. No. Here Siri was here for long. There was a picture called Her where he was talking to a phone and having a conversation on a phone. You know, this is a movie now, maybe a better part of 5-6 years, where he was having a relationship with his phone, just talking to the phone because there's this wealth of information the phone has, right? And he's talking to her, she has a female voice. He had a conversation on his phone, right? So we have reached that stage where the average human being may not be able to tell that they're dealing with artificial intelligence. And if you can't understand that, you may start giving up personal level information about yourself. Companies may start using data with AI to be more efficient, but all the while, our personal identifiable information, who we are, right, as a digital individual, is now being given up to these large language platforms that will help us, right, no doubt, but now expose us in ways that we don't even begin to understand.
So therefore, if it can be used, I mean, there are always pros and cons to everything, but should we fear or embrace AI?
We should embrace AI, no doubt. But we should embrace it from a position of information, knowledge, and understanding, right? From a position of information, understand what AI looks like currently, have an understanding of the technology that is currently there in terms of the capabilities, limitations, right? How it works, right? And even from the point of view of utilization, So therefore, if you know AI can do this, what do we want our staff to do with it, right? How would it impact our productivity and work? Because one of the things that I keep hearing over and over again in terms of staff is that we're going to lose our jobs.
Yeah, that
Right.
is a fear.
And it is a fear. But I would tell anyone right now, what we should be looking at is not job security, right, but career development, right? Big difference, big mindset shift, right? Change is inevitable, okay? Before, we 10 years ago, what was a cybersecurity officer, right? It might have been there internationally, but for Barbados, we hardly hiring anybody specifically cybersecurity. New jobs will be created, right? New efficiencies will come, yes. It will threaten some jobs. If you want to stay in a job and do that job for the rest of your life, that's a problem. If you look at a career path, it means that you have signed yourself on to a lifelong set of learning. And those people who jump on the bandwagon to accept it and embrace it would realize that, yeah, even down to the hotels would be in trouble, because right now I've seen, and it's a gimmick hotel, but you can stay there for real, where the receptionist is a dinosaur, right? And they check you in, right? And is this dinosaur theme? Ain't no humans. Humans are in the back, maybe just being, tech guys, right? And the waiter comes up is a dinosaur. There's a whole dinosaur theme in Japan, right? And if you think about it, that sounds far-fetched. But let's be clear about one thing. Hotels are about making money. Yes, you can have the unions jumping on board and saying we're protecting jobs. That sounds real good. But when those hotels have to compete with other jurisdictions who may be using technology in a particular way, they would have to find that happy balance. But it's the individual who understands how to manipulate the technology now and be that pioneer to say, you know what? The reason why you can hire me is that not only do I know my job, but I also know these things. So when you hire me, you can get a job with 3 people. Why? Because yes, I use AI. I use AI responsibly, all right? But no, I'm so much more productive for you. And those people who can actually convince an employer in a job interview how they could be more productive in their job, all right, is going to retain that person's interest and maybe get the job.
So we have these wonderful systems in place in terms of IT infrastructure. We have the skill set, and we're spending money. This is both government and the private sector. Where do we go from here?
I think where we go from here is to have a honest conversation to understand where the country sees IT. Is it a competitive tool? Is it an expense that is just annoying, all right? That we have to keep spending on this thing called IT, all right? Or is it a strategic, I guess, element to our viability as a country and our development as a country? Is it strategic? And is it germane to our next 50 years? Right? Recently celebrated 50 years of independence. So the next 50, is it built on IT? And if it's built on IT, then we have to determine what components are germane and core to our development. So like cybersecurity. So therefore, we must have a cybersecurity czar, right? And not be left to individual organizations, but have a national approach to it. So IT must become a national thing. Take, for example, remember the tourism match, tourism in our business, we must play our part. So we have some person identified specifically for tourism. We must treat IT the same way, because what's coming under that, okay, would be the artificial intelligence, right, issue, right? And we need to harness everything, including artificial intelligence, have a national approach to it.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time, Ms. Williams, to sit and chat with us and sharing some very good information for those listening and watching.
Thank you, Lisa. I was happy to be here. It was fun.
It was fun, indeed. Thank you very much. That was Mr. Stephen Williams, information technology expert and principal consultant of Data Privacy and Management Advisory Services. I am Lisa Lord. Thank you so much for watching. Do have yourself a wonderful evening.